Hey everybody, it's me, the Real King of BC. Today I just wanted to talk about gaming journalism because, well, gaming journalism is such an interesting topic to talk about. Not to mention the fact that gaming journalism has been a rather huge topic lately, given all the different articles and all the different topics that different gaming journalists have been talking about, and really just gaming journalism sites in general. But Gaming journalism has always been a tricky subject in general, just because of the fact that it seems as though most gaming journalists just aren't that good at their job. And not all gaming journalists are necessarily horrible at their job, but more often than not, gaming journalists usually end up putting their foot in their mouth, or, they end up saying something that really upsets the gaming community or the fans of a certain game that they like. Um, anyway, not every gaming journalist does this, but it happens more often than not. Um, it's not exactly a rare case of a gaming journalist saying something dumb or just writing something ridiculous in an article. You get my drift, right? It happens all the time. And while there are a few decent gaming journalism sites, most of them are clearly not um, they're clearly not credible, right? They're not reliable. Most of them act like half the stuff they report on is newsworthy when in reality it's really not. It may just be a rumor, it may just be a lie, or even a leak. We don't really know. But they report on it like it's actual news, which I'm not really a big fan of. And then you have the fact that most of the time they usually end up clickbaiting people into reading their articles. I was about to say they're crappy articles, but hmm, half the time their articles just aren't very good. They're either mediocre or they're bad. Sometimes they're terrible, sometimes they're decent. But for the most part, usually gaming journalism articles are not very good and fairly clickbaity and feel like they're just there to just make people mad, right? Or push a ridiculous agenda or whatever. You got people like IGN, right? Who not all of their reviews are necessarily bad or awful, but a lot of their reviews just aren't that good. And there are a few of their reviews that are decent at best. And that's the problem with IGN, right? They're inconsistent. Their product is very inconsistent. Sometimes they'll put out a decent review. Sometimes they may even put out a mediocre review. Other times they'll put out a bad review. It's like IGN just aren't consistent. And I know people have been saying this for years about IGN, sure. This is nothing new. IGN has never been very reliable. They've never really been very credible. And the fact that so many gaming publishers and gaming developers go to them, despite the fact that they're not very credible or reliable, is, in my opinion, it's, I don't want to say it's necessarily confusing, but it's odd, right? Like, IGN is, they're infamous for a reason. Like I said, they're not reliable, so it seems weird that all of these big gaming companies keep coming to them and and are surprised when they drop the ball. Okay, they're probably not surprised at this point, but you get my drift, right? Uh, yeah, that's just IGN. I haven't even gotten to GameSpot yet, who I don't know as much as IGN. Like, I don't know as much about them, but from what I can tell, while they're not as bad as IGN, they're not that good either. They're okay at best and mediocre at worst, I assume. And then you had sites like Kotaku and Polygon, who, for the longest time, could not keep their politics in check. Um, Polygon and Kotaku are known for just being infested with a lot of BS politics and having their articles just be nonsensical and filled to the brim with an insane amount of politics, and it's clear that they're harboring an agenda. It's either that or it's a bunch of clickbait, which really wouldn't surprise me at this point. Um, Actually, in my opinion, it's it's more likely clickbait, but I don't really know. But then again, there have been employees at gaming journalism sites that really do have BS agendas and can't keep their politics in check for whatever reason. And that's another big thing about these gaming journalism sites. They can't keep their politics at the door. They can't keep them in check, even though they should. It's clear that they don't really care as much about the game that they're reviewing or their job when they do a sloppy job of reviewing the game. Half the time, gaming journalists can't seem to get past a tutorial or get past a game that really isn't that hard, but for them it is, which makes no sense. And they're playing on the easiest difficulty, and yet they still can't get past the first level. It makes no freaking sense, right? But yeah, gaming journalism has always been like that, though. That's nothing new. They've always been like very spotty and not as credible. And no matter whatever site you go to, there's usually like someone there that can't keep their politics in check, or are just bad at their job and can't review the game properly. And that's how gaming journalism has always been. And not every gaming journalism site is necessarily like that, right? Um, there actually are a few credible gaming journalism sites, but they're not as well known as the more infamous people like IGN, right? They're not as prominent as Kotaku or Polygon. Um, and I don't even want to get into G4. Like, the whole thing with G4 is in freaking insane. I haven't been following the story, but from what I've seen, the small snippets of that whole thing are just catastrophic. It's like a nuclear meltdown. I'm not exaggerating. The collapse of G4 is something else, man. But yeah, I don't hate gaming journalists to begin with, but I've never really been the biggest fan of gaming journalists because to me they've just been never very credible, and they're not people that you should always go to get the latest scoop. Sometimes, yes, and there are reputable gaming journalists out there, they exist, but like I said, they're not as well known, right? They're just not as well known as the not so credible sites, but yeah. And of course, I've heard multiple stories about people who used to work for people like, um, or sites like IGN and GameSpot and so on, and the horror stories and so on and so forth, and why they stopped working there. And yeah, um, but yeah, in general, gaming journalism it's a minefield, right? It's hard to get things right. It really is. And honestly, I feel bad for the journalists themselves sometimes, um, because more often than not, they're usually being told by their bosses to do something ridiculous or clickbaity in order to get those views, in order to get easy views, in order to get easy money. I'm not making this up. That's just how it is. It happens all the time in every different medium, be it TV shows or video games or movies and so on. Like, those types of sites will always exist. That's just how it is. There will always be sites that trick you and clickbait you into getting easy views, into getting easy money, because they don't actually care about you. They don't actually care about the product that they're reviewing or talking about or discussing. All they care about are the easy views, the easy clicks, the easy money. To them, all publicity is good publicity. It doesn't matter whether you're being negative about them or not, or positive about them, or or whatever. But if you're being neutral about them, well, then that's not really going to drive a lot of views. Basically, you might as well be bored of them at that point. So that's why they try to clickbait people and bring up these BS agendas half the time. It's either that or the person who's just writing the article is just unhinged and just can't keep their politics on lockdown. But whatever, that's just how I see it. But yeah, like I said, I don't really hate gaming journalists. I've just never thought that they were very credible. And even now, I still hesitate to call them credible. There are very few actually decent and good and credible gaming journalists out there, and really that's a shame. Because gaming is a wonderful medium. It really is a shame that gaming journalism has been bogged down by people who clearly don't know what they're doing, and people who started ridiculous controversies over nothing because they can't do their jobs. But yeah. And it's sad too. Because sometimes the employees just have to meet a deadline. They have to put food on the table for their family, so they have to do what their boss says, or they may just end up getting fired or demoted. So, yeah, it's a shame, but oh well. Um, But yeah, that's all I got for today. Um, don't forget to check all of the important stuff as per usual. It's in the description. Please don't forget to check it. It is very important. And of course, as per usual, if you want to see more of me, then you know exactly what to do. I won't hold your hand through the process. And of course, if you're new here, please enjoy your stay. And also, please try not to be toxic. This has been the Real King of BC. King out.